Well, hello, my name's Anwin. I'll be directing Colonialism is Terrible, but Pho is Delicious. This was actually brought to me by Josh. Josh was like, hey, do you know this play? And I had not heard of it at the time. And so we read it, and then I think we thought it would be a great co-production between the two companies. So I think, we did a co-production reading of it last year. And now it's on your guys' schedule, and then it'll be on our schedule next year in April. I think it's funny, which is good. It's something I've not seen before, right? I think, which is exciting. I think the idea of it just being like the history of the most well-known Vietnamese soup ever, pho, right? Like that's kind of awesome. As a person who was born in Vietnam and came over here as a refugee during the evacuation, I've never seen that on stage before. It made me learn more about pho than I knew. Other than my main history with pho was eating it and complaining how it wasn't as good as my mother's pho. So, but then the fact that it takes place in 3 different times, right? Like starting with going back to the 1800s when Vietnam was part of a French Union, and the introduction of pot de pho, or pot de pho, and then in 1999, in Vietnam, when Vietnam's just opening up its borders and to Western businesses, and then at the time, present day, in Brooklyn, where we find ourselves in like a fancy, trendy Brooklyn restaurant specializing in authentic Vietnamese food, led by a non-Vietnamese chef. That's all fun, right? And then this lovely conceit that Dustin has done with centering the Vietnamese characters, right? Where we're going to be using dialects and accents to sort of center the Vietnamese characters, so we're seeing the world through their point of view, which is, again, it opens a door for lots of humor, and it sits in a place that I rarely see. I think we were lucky now with Queen Nguyen and such, and his work and such, but like I've never seen that before, and even still not in the same way that Dustin's doing with the play. I think we had a lot of conversations before the reading, and we've had a few conversations since the reading, and mostly I just try to communicate back moments that I need more clarification on, moments that I need to understand what's happening in this in the play, both what's happening for the characters and then also what information is being relayed to the audience. And as far as what he's working on, I'm waiting with all of us. I think we're waiting to see how that's coming along. To be clear for everyone, we're doing a rolling world premiere, so we're going to do it at the Chance too, where I'm artistic director, and we have a space, a similar size space. But it's, for most of its life, it's been a flexible space. But due to so many different reasons since COVID, we've actually made it into sort of a fixed thrust space. And you literally could drop your theater in our theater, right? So it's kind of interesting how that worked out. And we were looking at the dimensions, and literally this stuff, definitely even though the audience is maybe a little bit different, but still the same same thrusts, about the same amount of seats on all sides, but the actual staging space could literally just be dropped in. So I think I'm excited to be able to. I'm excited the fact that they're so similar, right?
Hi, I'm Monique Williams, Aurora Theater's Associate Artistic Director, and I will be directing Dominique Morisseau's Paradise Blue for the 22-23 season. Paradise Blue is set in Dominique's hometown of Detroit, Michigan. The year is 1949. We are at the Paradise Club on the strip known as Paradise Valley in the neighborhood known as Black Bottom. The residents there are facing new tensions as the mayor is on the move to rid the city of urban blight. And so urban renewal and contractors and development is encroaching. And Blue, a haunted trumpeter, is faced with a choice. Does he sell the club or does he keep the club? And if he sells the club, what happens to the house band that plays bebop? And what happens to his devoted wife, Pumpkin? There's so many rich textures to this play. There's the bebop music. There's the haunted spirits in all of these characters. There's a mysterious woman, Silver, who arrives at the club and disrupts everyone's life, teaching Pumpkin some valuable lessons along the way. There's Corn and P. Sam, members of blues bands who are also trying to navigate their own music careers and their life and love and what it would mean to be without this regular gig. Morisseau has written Paradise Blue as part of the Detroit Project, a trilogy of 3 plays set across different times in her home to explore the evolution, the change, the growth of Detroit. I love that Morisseau writes about home. It's something that's become increasingly important to me as we've navigated the last few years of this pandemic. I've become really enthralled with migration stories. How do we end up points north and west? How do we leave our homes in the South? I appreciate so much that Morisseau is investigating all of this and her own family roots and heritage in Detroit. I'm happy to dive into this play with some wonderful collaborators who I've worked with before, some at Aurora and some not. Joining me on this adventure will be scenic designer Stephen Jones, lighting designer Stephanie Ann Johnson, sound designer Cliff Crothers. It's a huge point of pride for me that Aurora would produce this play. As you know, if you've been a long-time Aurora subscriber, we did Detroit 67 not too long ago to great acclaim. I hope you'll join us as we bring this other story from Dominique Morisseau to our stages.
Hello, I'm Josh Costello, the artistic director of Aurora Theater Company, and I'm going to be directing Cyrano at Aurora coming up this spring. Cyrano was written in, I believe, 1897, the late 19th century, by a French playwright named Edmond Rostand. And he is, best known for Cyrano. He also wrote the play that was adapted into The Fantastics, the musical in the 1960s. But this play, it was a huge, huge hit when it first opened in Paris. And, there's, the story is there was an hour-long standing ovation, which, seems hyperbolic, but maybe, I don't know, it was a different time. But I love plays from this period. I love Oscar Wilde. It's the same time that Importance of Being Earnest was being written and Shaw was writing. And it has some of that just really delightful use of language that you saw in that period. But it's set much earlier. It's set in the 17th century. And Rostand did this meticulous research about what was going on. And Cyrano is a real person. Cyrano was a real historical figure who lived in Paris in the 17th century. The story about Roxanne, who seems to be mostly have invented by Rostand, but he was one of the first science fiction novelists, Cyrano was. And there's a whole bunch about the moon and his fascination with the moon, both as a symbol, but also, he tells a whole story about having gone to the moon and had this adventure on the moon, which is a real story that the historical Cyrano wrote. When I started working at Aurora with Tom Ross, the former artistic director, we talked a lot about classic plays and how our audience loves classic plays, but that we have already done all of the classic plays that fit on our small stage and that we can do with the number of actors that we can fit on our stage. And we talked about creating a series of adaptations of classic plays that take these big, huge plays with huge casts and find ways to make them fit on our intimate space and intimate versions of these big classic plays. And we never ended up, putting a commissioning program into place for that because we were focused on the new plays that we were developing. But that idea has never left. It really stuck in my head. And in fact, in 2015 or so, I started writing an adaptation of Cyrano, which is a play that had been on my bucket list as a director for a long, long time. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece of writing. It's very funny. It's very heartfelt. It's very moving. And it has just the most extraordinarily beautiful language. And I knew that language would play so well in our intimate space when you can be right up close to it and really hear all of the nuances, and gives the actors a chance to really bite in to this delicious language. But it's a play with a cast of like 50 and huge, huge scenes. And just there's no way that it would fit on Aurora's stage. So what I did is I read through the play again and thought about who are the core characters of this play and what is the core story of this play. And it turns out that all those big crowd scenes are, they're lovely and they're theatrical and wonderful, but they're not central to what's really happening. It's the story is about a love triangle between Cyrano, who's a soldier, Roxanne, who is a young woman of immense intelligence and wit and love of language, and Christian, who is a new soldier, who Cyrano sort of takes under his wing. And of course, Cyrano has this enormous nose, and that's his what he sees as being a flaw. He has tried to make up for this by, as he puts it, being admirable in everything. He's the best sword fighter. He's the best poet. He's the most honorable, and he does everything with a trademark sense of panache, which is a word that was introduced into the English language from this play. And panache literally means a white plume, the white plume that you would wear in your hat in 17th century France. But it means more than that to Cyrano. It means his whole way of being admirable in every interaction that he has. And he is admirable. He's amazing. And yet he does not believe that any woman could love him because of his nose. And he's in love with Roxanne. She falls in love with Christian, who is a very good-looking, handsome, young soldier in Cyrano's company. And Cyrano, and of course, Christian is tongue-tied. Christian is in love, falls in love at first sight with Roxanne, but knows that she is somebody who loves wit and poetry and language, and feels that he is unable to deliver on that front. And so Cyrano and Christian combine to form a hero of romance. They use Cyrano's words and Christian's looks to try to woo Roxanne. And the story goes on from there. And really, it's a story about these three people. And then there's De Guiche, who is the antagonist in the beginning, who's a wealthy nobleman who wants to essentially force Roxanne into marriage with him. And then there's a whole bunch of other characters, one of whom is Lebray, who is a good friend of Cyrano's. And so those five characters are the essential core of the story. And it was fairly straightforward to write a first draft of of an adaptation that just focused on those 5 characters, and all of the big crowd scenes have been cut or condensed or reconfigured in such a way that the whole story can be told with just 5 actors. And they're not playing a million characters each, right? It's not one of these, it's not a trunk show where the characters are constantly changing costumes and showing up as different people in every scene. It's those 5 characters in every scene and telling this story. And it worked fairly well. And so we did a reading of it in 2015, and then another theater announced that they were doing a big full production of Cyrano, and so we sort of put that on the shelf. But now coming out of the pandemic, looking at what kinds of stories we want to tell on our stage, and we want to tell a wide variety of stories. We've done a lot of new plays, and we wanted to do a classic play that just felt so good to be in the theater with everybody once again. And this play, it's such a theatrical play. It's such a piece of theater history, but also something that continues to speak to us today, that speaks to all these feelings that we have about each other, all these feelings of love and connection and sacrifice, and brings them to life on stage in just such a beautiful way with such amazing language. So we've cast wonderful Bay Area actor, much loved Bay Area actor who's been on our stage before. Aldo Billingsley is playing Cyrano. I'm very excited. He's never played the role before and has always wanted to. And he and I have, I have not directed Aldo before, but we've worked together, in various ways over the years. And we've been looking for a project to do together. And I'm just so thrilled that he'll be playing Cyrano at Aurora. And Leontine Mbeli Mbong will be playing Roxanne. And Leontine and I have also never worked together, and I've been such a fan of her work at Aurora and all over the Bay Area. She is such a brilliant actor and has such a lovely capacity for language. She handles language so beautifully. And as soon as we started thinking about doing this play, I knew I wanted Leontine to play Roxanne, and I'm so excited that she's going to do it. So I'm really excited to put this play on stage at Aurora.
I'm Jennifer King, and I'm the director of Hurricane Diane by Madeline George. I would say I became familiar with Hurricane Diane last summer. What I love about working at the Aurora is they send me good scripts, actually with me in mind for directing them. And when I read it, it just felt like a really terrific fit. And the reason for that is it had really strong women that I could relate to. And it also dealt with a classical text in a respect, in it being the Bacchae reimagined as a sequel. And I just thought that interplay was really, really interesting. And so that's how it came into my life. I have a wonderful history with the Aurora. I started out working at the Aurora in their new work series. And I started off by directing a staged reading of a new play. And after that, I became a reader. I basically did anything Tom Ross asked me to do creatively. He said, he'd always say, I'm not promising you a main stage. And I said, don't worry, we're just dating, Tom. And so that's how that started. And I think he did a trilogy of 5th of July, Tally's Folly, and Tally and Son. And Tally's Folly was up in the studio space upstairs. And then 5th of July was being produced on the main stage. And every Monday, we did a staged reading of Tally and Son. And that's a work by Lanford Wilson that is very rarely done. But the plays are all linked within the same family. And it was really well received. And the following year, I received a play, and that was Dry Powder. And when I read it, that's when I sort of knew that Aurora got me as an artist, because when I read it, I just knew that I could direct it and I was meant to direct it. And that was my first, for lack of a better term, main stage show at Aurora. Then I was to direct Sex with Strangers in May of 2020, and we all know how that turned out. And again, Hurricane Diane was sent to me, and it was just a wonderful gift. And I'm looking forward so much to sharing it with Aurora audiences. So the world of the play right now of Hurricane Diane we are in the beginning of the creative process, is initially the reason I was drawn to it was the sense of the play is about friendship. It is a group of women, 4 women who get together every week, either to drink wine or have coffee. And they're incredibly funny. They're incredibly smart. And Dionysus comes into their lives as a landscaper, as a lesbian. And they all are quite taken with Dionysus. And for some of them, they're fascinated. And for others, they're a little terrified. And what I think is most interesting about the play is what they are scared of. And in the beginning, when I looked at this play is a nice way to put it is a comedy about climate change, but it's so much deeper than that. It does deal most definitely with issues of climate change. But what I'm learning about it more and more is it is diving deep into what it means to be liberated. And what's interesting about Dionysus, the god of Dionysus, is that god was really the harbinger of liberation, whether it's through wine, whether it's through festival. And in many ways, these women find their own festival just within each other. And there's a leaning into the fact of they have each other, and it's very comfortable. I remember my own pandemic pod of women where we found great solace with each other. And then this other comes in, this force comes in, and that changes the dynamic. And I think it's what happens when something enters into a space where the women feel incredibly sacred, and they feel that it's been broken because somehow someone new, something new has emerged. And that person, that being, that entity can be a mechanism for liberation if you decide to walk a new path. And I think this play is really about how are we dealing with certainty and uncertainty, and what are the costs of certitude? And so I'm going to leave it there. And how that is manifesting in the design is, well, we're just starting. The play takes place within a kitchen of a very wealthy home in Red Bank, New Jersey, a very wealthy suburb. And it's one of those developments where if you walk into the houses, they all look the same. So for these 4 women, we go into their kitchens and they all look the same. I imagine we are going to keep with that convention. Victoria Livingston Hall, who again did costumes for Dry Powder, is back because she really has a wonderful imagination when it comes to modernity, because this play does take place in the now. And Dawn, I'm sure you're experiencing it. I look outside and I see the the sky covered in smoke, and I'm reminded that there's a fire. We are in one of I think the most impactful heat waves on historic record. And things are changing. And how are we going to respond as humans? And I think that's what this play is about. New to the team is Lana Palmer, who is our sound designer and also composer. We will be creating some original music, because I'm going to do a little spoiler alert, is that we are going to pay homage to a Greek chorus, and so we are going to create pieces around that. So it's a really exciting design team that are all very excited with bringing this play to life. So there are 5 remarkable roles. Dionysus, who's called Diane in this play, is going to be played by Stacey Ross, and I'm so excited to work with her on this work. And then we are currently casting for the 4 other roles, the 4 other women, but I know with who is on the list that they are going to be extraordinary. After I had read the play, it wasn't decided whether it was going to be in the season or not. And I went to see an exhibit at the old Cliff House. It's been turned into an art exhibition hall. And there was an exhibition called Land's End, which dealt with what is happening in our oceans as far as trash, climate change, all of that. And I found it incredibly disturbing and incredibly moving. It's really how man is forcing his will on the oceans and how that is affecting climate change. And I think that was when I knew I absolutely had to work on this play. And I fervently wrote both you and Josh saying, hey, I think that it's essential that Aurora do this now. One of the things that's happening, or I feel that's happened, is that we seem to have forgotten the issues of climate change because COVID has taken such a phenomenal, it made such an impact on the world. And there's other things that are impacting the world as well. And I think we get the opportunity to then show, hey, remember those fires? Remember that heat wave? You know what's going on in our oceans? We can still turn it back. Are you going to get out of your comfort zone and allow that to happen?